fabulous Las Vegas as the sun rises on day 2 of the West Coast Classic. Bright and early here in the Mojave. It is the final semifinal weekend en route to the 2021 CrossFit Games from Orleans Arena here in Las Vegas. We start with the teams today, again here on day 2. And the usual suspects you would suspect are at the top of the standings. Backcountry Black out of Colorado is in first through 2 events. The 2 Invicti teams, Invictus and Invictus Unconquerable, are in second and in 5th. The event description for event number 3. If you asked all of these athletes which event they were looking forward to most this weekend, it was not this one. 6,000-meter ruck. It is an absolute bore to be out there in that crushing heat, even this early in the morning, because it is above 90 degrees here in the Mojave Desert at 6 a.m. local time. The high for today, 115, which is why we've moved this event up earlier than it was originally slated on the daily schedule. We welcome you high atop Orleans Arena. Tommy Marquez, my name is Joel Gadet. You might know this guy. He knows a little bit about what it takes to run. The subject matter expert on aerobic capacity here in the world of CrossFit. Chris Hinshaw joins us. And Tommy, this is going to be exciting.
Yeah, I can't wait to see these athletes. We actually got to tackle this yesterday and testing it. And Chris, what I'm really curious about, I guess, is everyone circles the 6K run when you see it on the slate, but how much does this tax the body in terms of its impact on the rest of the slate of programming?
I mean, that's the thing, is that this is event 3. We've got 4 more events after this, and one of the things that people need to understand is that events like this are going to showcase weaknesses, and the weakness isn't necessarily just in this event. It's their ability to recover afterwards and perform in the remaining events.
Yeah, and one of the things we saw was the heat earlier on. We got to feel it a little bit. How much does that impact that ability to perform and recover later on in the weekend?
So that's a significant thing. It's not only a significant thing in your performance today. I mean, for example, if they were racing at 60 degrees versus 90 to 95 degrees, their mile pace would be 15 to 20 seconds faster at a minimum. And so it does have a significant impact. The key for these athletes is, what is their protocol after this event? What does their fluid replacement system look like? What does their carb replacement look like? That is essential. If they don't have a protocol, then they're going to underperform for the remainder of their events.
Chris, typical millennial question here for you as well. This is a 6 a.m. start time for these teams. You got to be up early and active, literally as the sun rises. How does that maybe impact waking up your system and waking up your body to experience this kind of test?
So there's a lot of fact about working out at a time when you're going to compete. That's part of the training protocol, and this was a surprise. It was something that caught people off guard. If you're not comfortable in working out in the morning, that's a deficit for you.
There are no heats to this. There is heat. There are no heats. All these teams will run together, all 20 of the teams, as we get set here for event number 3, event 1 of day 2. The West Coast Classic trying to punch tickets to the CrossFit Games. And the 2 Invictus teams right on your screen there. They came in ranked 1 and 3. They are 2 and 5 after day 1. And Tommy, you'll note off the top here, the event does start inside. Each of these teams are tethered together as they run. They will then run out into the parking lot, but they will have to come back into the arena, and that's a critical juncture of the race.
Yeah, and these teams are tethered together as well, so they got to maintain contact with that rope. You can see it basically looking like a leash at Disneyland for your kids. Chris, we saw the mass start here. If you're unfamiliar with this sort of territory, what are these athletes dealing with as you get this massive start with really 80 athletes in front of you all kind of collectively going together?
That to me is interesting because it really showcases the teams that are here to compete, the ones that are on that starting line, and their facial expressions. I mean, you saw a bunch of them that are starting stopwatches. They're interested in their split times. Those are sophisticated teams. Those are the ones to watch out for. The other thing is that the teams that are in front, when they encounter that first turn, it's more of an accordion style. So when you get in there first, you don't actually have to slow down and wait for the other team to round the corner. You maintain your velocity all the way from the beginning of the turn all the way out of the turn. Other teams are going to be forced to almost stop and wait for the others to go. Well, next thing you know, you look up and you see the first place teams, and it's like, how'd they get 150 meters ahead? Well, that's how.
A couple of notes of strategy and of event as we go through this here. The weight will increase, not necessarily in the ruck as it did at the CrossFit Games in 2019 when this event first made its appearance, the teams are all wearing rucks right now, but every time they come back inside the arena, they will grab sandbags that will add to the weight on this run. Those sandbags can be carried however you carry them as we go through this event. So that's the interesting thing to note in that regard. And then, Chris, you mentioned the fact that each athlete, or some of the athletes, were starting stopwatches. This race is being run marathon style. So it's not start, go, and that is everybody's start time. They are chip time. So when you crossed the starting line, that is when your time began. So who is in first visually may not necessarily be who is in first literally, and maybe there's some strategy to that, because you could be back of the pack, but you're not really back of the pack because you started later.
Let's face it, it's not easy to be in the back, ever, no matter where you are. It's easy to be in the front. And so part of it is that when you are in front, you are dictating the tempo for the rest of the field, and that's critical. I mean, you're establishing your dominance. And if teams are up front that are already in contention, meaning they're in the top 5, then those are true threats. And that's what I'm looking at. Now, when I talk about stopwatch and getting splits, what you're really looking at is your lap times. How are we doing as a team relative to our strategy? Remember, these teams, they all have a strategy, they have a plan. And how are we doing in terms of executing that plan? That's key. You know, Tommy and I had a chance to do this yesterday, and one of the things about the ruck with just the 20 pounds in it is it's a very well-built product. The product, it doesn't, the plate doesn't shake around in there, it doesn't vibrate, it doesn't bounce. It's really locked into part of your torso. And this opening piece is relatively simple because of the design of the pack.
And you can see the backpack there. There's, you know, your typical backpack, 2 straps, then you have the chest strap across. Yesterday when we had to test this, we saw a lot of kind of jockeying to try and figure out what the positioning of the backpack is going to be. What was comfortable for you, Chris? Because, you know, I felt like I started a little bit looser than most people. It wasn't quite as cinched down. That seemed to work for me pretty early on.
Yeah, so you know what's interesting is there's a strap that you can fasten between the 2 arm straps, and what you can do is cinch it, and that helps stabilize the pack. The problem is that it makes it more restrictive in terms of your breathing, and so one of the things that I did, Tommy, is I pulled it as high as I could up near my collarbone to try and allow my chest to be able to freely open. But I did do a lot of playing around with that as my fatigue continued to build. This event is a fatigue generating event. It is never going to get easier than you see right now on the screen. It progressively gets more difficult. And it's not just because of the increase in weight. It's because of the increase in volume. You're doing more and more time. This volume is a legit distance. It's a significant distance. I mean, you know, when we did this yesterday, Tommy, we measured it.
Yeah.
Because one of the things that a lot of events are notorious for is making them short. In my opinion, this is longer than 6,000 meters.
Yeah, we were just talking about that. We timed it out. It was right around the 6K mark, but when we tested it, we didn't do quite the full entry into the event. So you were saying that could actually make it a little bit longer, just a little added nuance to this.
I mean, no one likes to have more than what's prescribed. Let's face it. Yeah, so imagine if you're doing a rep scheme workout and it's like, yeah, no, it's really actually more than that. No one likes that, because the thing is you're planning for 6,000 meters. You're planning your strategy around the known variables in this workout. There should never be any surprises. But this additional loop, I figure this is adding another 400 meters onto the total volume. And that's, now we're at 4 miles instead of 3.7.
Chris, how much of a factor is the heat at this juncture? It's early in the morning, it's 90 degrees, everybody always says, but it's a dry heat. But also, how does that impact the way that you breathe, the way that you feel, the way that your system reacts to the environment around you?
So one of the things that all of these athletes are doing is they're aware of the heat, they're aware of the temperature. There are other athletes in the field that have been training in the heat. And we know about heat acclimation, that in about 14 days of training in the heat, you're going to acclimate to this temperature. This isn't an extreme level of heat, unless, of course, you have not trained in it. Now you're not prepared. And so one of the things that I did yesterday was how far into this workout is it going to be an impact, the heat? And I started noticing it after about minute 4.
And I'll go back to the dry heat comment. Like, if there's a difference to where you train, we've seen CrossFit hype training out of extremely humid Boca Raton, Florida. When they come out here, it's just as hot as what they're used to and what they train in regularly, but it feels different. Do they react different?
So for them, the humidity makes it much, much worse. I mean, that's the thing, is that those athletes that trained in Tampa, trained in Florida, they are a huge threat in this because the temperature is a non-factor. You know, we talked about temperature and the impact it has. It does. It has a significant impact. You know, you take the temperature of 60 degrees and you bump it up to 90. That will slow an athlete down by about 15 to 20 seconds a mile. That's the equivalent of going from sea level and running a mile at 6,000 feet. It's the same type of impact on the body, but if you're not prepared for that, now you're surprised. And anytime as these athletes, they are surprised, they'll underperform.
All right, so let's talk about these athletes coming back into the arena. You'll notice the tethers and the ropes have magically disappeared. Those were all hung up on a bike rack just outside the arena, allowing the athletes to come into the arena, have their hands free to grab these packs, throw them on their back, or carry them back out of the arena. They will then, as you see here, re-tether and try to figure out, where do I hold the rope? Where do I put the bag? How are we going to do this? Tommy, you carried the pack a handful of different ways and tried out some different methods yesterday. Did you find one that worked best?
So early on with the lighter pack, just trying to save some load on my shoulders because I knew I was going to be carrying the heavier packs up top. I did like suitcase style for a couple of meters just to start as we came out of the arena. Left hand, picked up, counted a couple light poles, switched to the right hand, and it actually just kind of helped stretch out my shoulders a little bit. So much was just compacted up top from the ruck, and I was starting to kind of bunch up a little bit. Just by letting my arms get extended and stretching out with the bag when it was only 20 pounds was a huge benefit. Just a little bit of like a mental win for me.
And what's interesting to see is how each of these athletes, the very first response, throw that thing on my back and let's go.
The sandbags actually were harder than I thought in terms of it more felt like concrete. Sandbags that I've run with in the past, they're very pliable. They can move the sand around and you can position and wrap it around your neck. This, it was more like concrete on one end, and it was hard to migrate the sand over. It was lopsided. And so even when it was sitting like in the center point of your neck on your back, there was one side that was dramatically heavier than the other, which caused you to fiddle with it.
Did you unzip the bag to check, is my question.
I should have.
Renewed Strength CrossFit is the group that is in front right now at the head of the pack. We talked about being able to train in heat. Those are the guys from the oil rig area down in Midland, Texas. This is old hat to them.
That's the thing, is that teams are aware of where they're going, and they know that it's not a surprise it's going to be hot in Las Vegas. The question really is do they have the ability to train for the heat? Do they have that option available? And we saw that with the evolution of the CrossFit Games when countries were coming over, athletes were coming over from Europe. They were realizing, for example, Iceland, they were realizing that, it's going to be hot in Los Angeles and we need to come over early. And they started coming 2-3 weeks early, and they mitigated that issue. There was no longer a heat-related issue for them. The problem with this is that this is really early in the season. What are you going to do for a sanctional or a semifinal type competition? You're going to come to Las Vegas 3 weeks ahead of time.
That's probably not a recipe for success.
Right.
You might be out of money for two reasons. You're going to have to put yourself up in Las Vegas, and you're in Las Vegas for 3 weeks.
Yep.
Right.
Well, one thing we haven't mentioned, Chris, is, and we do have some teams that regularly compete at sea level. I come from California, working at sea level. How much? Las Vegas is at about 2,000 feet elevation. Does that factor in at all?
No, 2,000 feet is one of the points where it's not going to make an impact. I wouldn't know. If someone's mentioning elevation, then that's an excuse. I don't find that to be. It's the same thing. Salt Lake City, that would be a little bit higher, and that would be more of an impact, and it would have a say. But what we want when we look at elevation, we've got to get closer to around 6,000 meters, like Denver, Boulder. That matters.
Renewed Strength right now is still in first place. The Ohio Brutes are in second place right behind them. They came in as the 5th seed this weekend. They had a 14th place finish in the first, and then a 2nd place finish in the second event. So Ohio Brutes right now could use some points just outside of games qualification in 6th place coming into day 2.
It looks like Ohio Brutes may have actually passed Renewed Strength on that last switch
they did.
back.
Yep. So Brutes is now in first place, and I don't want to say comfortably so, but as you continue to see these packs widen, Chris, how big of gaps are these?
So that's an interesting thing, and I look at that all the time. There is a unique phenomenon when you run, and it's where there's almost a rubber band tensioning between the group in front of you or the individual in front of you and yourself. And we know that after you get about 7 to 10 feet in front, that rubber band breaks, and the team behind or the individual behind will let you go. And that's what you want to do. If you're going to make a move and pass somebody, you've got to pass them with some authority, some conviction. Because if you make that move and then stall out about 4 or 5 feet in front of them, then it's going to do nothing but strengthen the team behind. And so one of the things about running is it's very tactical, it's very strategic. This course is interesting because you are constantly seeing the teams in front of you and the teams behind you over and over because you're zigzagging through this parking lot.
And Tommy, that mattered yesterday when you tested this out.
Yeah, yesterday we did it as individuals, and coming into this final switchback, there's a point when you make the final turn back towards the center of this parking lot, and then you come into the venue where you can't see the athletes behind you anymore. You have one last chance to take a peek at them at the turn, and then you're turning left into the venue. Well, president of Loud and Live Sports, Matt O'Keefe, used that to his advantage. He emptied the tank to try to catch me, and he came from out of nowhere, almost passed me at the finish line. Credit to him. Almost, though.
Almost. Yep.
Ohio Brutes continues to push the pace here at the front. Corey Spellman is the male athlete on your right. He leads that pack with that tether just held behind him in his right hand. That's Cece Piper right behind him. Lauren Sheehan is their second female athlete, and then Aaron Nisley as well in that group. And it is Renewed Strength that continues right behind them. Team Invictus is in third.
So what makes it interesting here is these teams that in front, they're very close to one another. There's a significant advantage of being the team in first place because they're dictating the tempo. And they already established their dominance because they went and made a move and passed them. And they passed them with some authority. They made a gap. In order for the team in second to bridge this gap, it's going to be a significant effort. But the advantage for this team in second is they're not having to think. They're on autopilot. All they have to do is just see the team in front of them in their vision. And when you don't have to think, you do conserve energy. And that's the advantage. If you're in trouble, then don't lead. Sit off the shoulder of the leader and let them do the work.
How much thinking is going into as far as the individual athletes managing pace? Because, you know, we got to do this as individuals, and we got to focus on our own pace. But as a team of 4 tethered to this rope, you kind of have to account for maybe your slowest runner, or that maybe an athlete that is underperforming in the midst of this event as it gets a little bit heavier and a little bit longer.
That's a great point. The thing is in team competition, what you notice, the advanced teams, they are aware of the strengths and weaknesses of the other athletes on their team. And it's not through communication. They know through their movement. Right. So in this case, you would listen to their breathing cadence. And the breath is the tell. Remember, when we are breathing in that oxygen, that's our aerobic energy source. And it is one of the vital pieces of this workout. Well, when your demand for oxygen exceeds what you can actually bring in, we know that as hyperventilation. And then we see an acceleration in our breathing cadence. We start seeing it much more rapid. In the movement of running, we monitor the cadence of breath based upon the number of steps you take. So how many steps are you taking per cycle of breath? So extreme hyperventilation is where you would take 2 steps for every cycle of breath, meaning your demand is so extreme that you've got to put yourself in that most extreme breathing cadence. Controlled is 4 steps or higher. And so what you would listen for is that breath, the cadence of the breath. That would tell you whether or not your teammate is in trouble or okay. So you don't have to do it through words of going, hey, you know, you good, you good. You know from the breath. The breath is the whole tell. You can't fake that.
Interesting question is how many of the athletes out there know how to do it that way and be efficient as teams working together and gaining that information?
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing is that's where there's a lot of advantages with certain teams. They have access to that type of resource. But that's the evolution of this sport, is that everybody is picking that up. I mean, this concept of pacing, for example, that was unheard of 6 years ago. And now it's widely accepted as a way to maximize performance in a longer time domain, such as this event 3.
Ohio Brutes is in the lead here as we come back into the arena. Renewed strength right behind them. You'll notice they have released their tethers again as they've come into the arena to trade out their sandbags. This race started with a 10-pound plate for the women, a 20-pound plate in the ruck for the men. They came back in, took 30 and 40-pound sandbags. They have now moved up to 40 and 50-pound sandbags. Those that are on their third lap will have those black sandbags. If you're still on your second lap, you'll have that green, gray.
Yeah,
like an OD green.
Yeah. Olive is what I'm looking for. There we go.
And I don't know about you, Chris, but this little turnaround point, getting to be in the AC, was just a nice little boost of energy each lap. Kind of looking forward to it, especially for these teams. You get to release the tether. You kind of maybe take a few extra breaths without the sandbag as you're transitioning to the next one. Those little things matter over time. It felt like a little checkpoint for me every time.
it does. It seems like an aid station, right? You're coming through and you're getting, some replenishment, and it's a way for the body to recover. And it's interesting when you see these athletes, because by the time they're picking up this sandbag, they're enjoying the air conditioning and they want to extend it, and so they slow down their routine. Like, look at them, how aggressively they all drop that bag, and then they go and they're like, oh, wait, hold on, let's slow down here. Because it's a way for them to get their core down. They've got to find a way to recover. Tommy, when we did this yesterday, I wore a heart watch the whole way, a strap and everything. Lap 3, without question, was the hardest lap for me. And my max heart rate is 172 beats a minute. I was at 172 for most of lap 3.
Fitness Like a Pro from CrossFit Roseland has moved into third place as they move back outside the arena. Chris, that was really nice, by the way. As everybody came in, they could hear you in the arena say, round 3 was the hardest one for me.
They better know that.
Yep.
Thanks a lot, Chris.
They better know that. That's the thing, is that in every workout, there's what we call a sticking point. And in you doing 4 laps, it's pretty easy to identify where is your sticking lap. It's kind of like if you did 4 laps around the track as fast as you possibly can, which lap is your hardest lap? Well, it's always that third lap, and the reason why that is because the brain is always doing this assessment of how much pain, how much difficulty am I in, for how much distance do I have to go. And doubt creeps in, and the brain's like, no way, we can't do it. We got to shut it down. And so that's what happens, is in that third lap, it's the confidence that prevents the athletes in their success. And so if you can get through that third lap in this event, you're home free. Even with the increase in weight, it's like, man, I got this, because you just did 3.
Yep.
Those are your leaders right now. 6th overall after 2 events. It is Decorum CrossFit, the Ohio Brutes out of Lima, Ohio. Corey Spellman, Aaron Nisley, Lauren Sheehan, and CeCe Piper. And here comes Renewed Strength CrossFit. They're closing that gap, Chris, and it's interesting. You talked about the rubber band effect, but if you're sagging behind in second place and you're on autopilot maintaining that gap, yes, if you're going to make a move to get in front of them, you've got to do enough to break their spirits. But when do you make the move to come up behind them is the interesting question as well.
The key is the slowest person on your team. You have to be aware of that person, and you can't do it verbally because the other team's going to know. And so if you're like, hey, how are you? How are you? How are you? Then all you're going to do is strengthen the team that you're trying to pass. And that's where you need to communicate without words.
Or is that one, like, this may sound silly, do you create code words as a team? And it's like, if you're in the back, you say this to let us know you're good to go, and then we can push the pace.
So normally it would be like a little head nod, like, a little like, you good. Because that's what you want, is you want the signal, are you good? And then people will make that move.
And it looked like the Ohio Brutes dropped the rope there for a second, had to shuffle. They were trying to fight out. Renewed Strength looked like they were going to try and maybe make a pass on the turn. Ohio Brutes dropped the rope, and it kind of log jammed them for a split second.
All is fair in love and war.
It should be noted that, and Chris, I don't know if you picked up on this too, the direction that they were just going before they made the turn is slight downhill.
It is.
This direction that they're going now has a slight uphill to it. Is there any particular point at which you want to make that pass uphill or downhill?
So there is. So this parking lot, when you are going, and when you look at it on the screen from the left side to the right in that direction, it is definitely downhill, and it also has a slight tailwind. And so part of it is in a tailwind and running, you're going to be in dead air. makes it hotter. But the fact is that downhill really did help. And so part of it is it comes into your strategy. No one ever wants to quit. And in this workout, quitting would be walking. You don't want to do that. And so what you want to do is you want to take advantage of different portions of the course to maintain your overall strategy, meaning I'm not going to quit.
This is the first noticeable time as we try to fight for a pass here between Renewed Strength and the Ohio Brutes. It's the first noticeable time, by the way, I've seen somebody go to something other than throwing the pack behind their back. And we saw the kind of one-shouldered approach there for a hot second. But very quickly, Corey Spellman went back to throwing it behind his neck at the front for the Brutes, and they continue to fight off this charge with Renewed Strength trying to push in front.
Yeah, Renewed Strength tried to take an inside line on that turn there, and the Ohio Brutes basically accordioned out a little bit, kind of stretched and made themselves, multiple lanes wide, as you say in NASCAR.
Is there a smart way to use that tether to maybe take up some space?
I mean, let's face it. If you have to make a pass, why not make that pass difficult? There's plenty of room. The lane is wide. Why give them an inside track? If you're going to pass me, you know what? You're going to go sweeping way out in lane 8 and make your move.
It's like because you're tethered, you can almost do a Ricky Bobby shake and bake. Like you can use your teammates behind you to create obstacle.
I think it's called slingshotting. So this is where some tactics really come in, because part of it is you're so close to the others that now you can hear the other teams breathing. And the truth is that you're going to get a real good idea of who the weakest person is, and there's your target.
And I'm curious, Chris, what sort of how does morale affect this? Because we just saw Renewed Strength try to make that pass. They got shut down, and it seems like they've kind of fallen back a little bit. Does it, if you don't get the desired outcome of trying to make a push and pass, can that just completely wipe you?
I mean, that's what we're seeing here, is that they made the move, they tried to establish it, and it didn't work.
And they walked for a little bit there.
Right, and so what it did is it sent the weakest person on their team over the maximum sustainable pace, and they popped. They had to walk in order to recover. And so that is a very, very positive sign for the leading group. Let's face it, everybody out here right now is suffering. It doesn't matter if you're a great runner or not, you're suffering.
Well, and when you are suffering, especially on a competition weekend, it all comes down to how you recover after an event like this as well. So if these athletes need to, hit back to the hotel, the Airbnb, and Ramwad. You can unleash your calm, improve your mobility and athletic performance with Ramwad. Visit ramwad.com for a 7-day free trial. That is ramwad.com.
At this point in the race, this is the last kind of full switchback that you have where you're going downhill. After this next turn, they're going to start to make a short kind of half turn towards the center of the parking lot and then come back in. So at what point are they running, is Renewed Strength running out of time and runway to try and make a pass and at least catch up? So
I think that they're running out of time, and you can see a dramatic shift. So one of the things, just watch when they do these 180-degree turns. Is someone stopping? Is someone walking and using that almost as an excuse, right? It's a 180-degree turn. Why do we need to run it? Well, if the team in front of you is running it and you're not, like what you see, then you know what? There's an advantage there for that leading team. There is a strength that the other one doesn't have. And the other teams know that.
Honestly, the thing that's most remarkable to me is that we continue to show you, and now from this shot, you see some of the other teams coming up behind. We look at Ohio Brutes, we look at Renewed Strength, and then there is a large gap between those two teams and the rest of the field.
That's the thing about this course, is that you run past the team that's in front of you and behind you over and over again. Yeah, so now we're coming up to the part where Tommy was mentioning.
And those are the two teams. I mean, there's a gap between first and second now, too.
Yep. So we're coming up to that final stage, and here's the thing, is that it's now, if you can't catch that person in front of you, it's about preservation of your current spot. And so what we look for as coaches is we're looking at, are the athletes now so concerned that they're turning and looking back over and over again, meaning they're paranoid? That's a sign that the team would be in trouble.
They will enter the arena here to begin their final lap. They will drop these sandbags, and then the men will pick up a 60-pound, well, they'll have 60 pounds total, and then the women will have 50 pounds total on their backs. So if anybody wants to know where the hardest part is, it's this part coming up.
So they're coming into this last transition point, and this is the greatest level of fatigue. Right now, when they pick up that next bag, they're going to gradually feel better because their brain is sitting there and saying, you know what, it's only one more lap. We've already done 3. I'm good to go. Even if it's more weight, I'm still good to go. But look at this, that air conditioning.
Oh, it feels amazing.
And what's interesting is look at Renewed Strength.
Right.
Renewed Strength is using the indoor when they're not tethered together, and they have that brief moment to try to make a push and catch the Ohio Brutes here. Renewed Strength has made a push inside the arena and made this very interesting at the top.
Wow, yes, super aggressive. Look at that. That's what you want to see. So that, they're alert, they're attentive, right? Their mind is still in the game.
And that's a guy who knows what he's doing, how to compete. Jason Zobot may be the most well-conditioned athlete for Renewed Strength, former All-American soccer player. That guy's got an engine on him, so when it comes down to go time, he's the one that pushed the tempo and said, let's get going.
I mean, that's what you want is that mental acuity, right? Your head is still in the game. And that's the thing that a lot of people don't recognize, that when you get fatigued, it's really hard to think strategically.
We gotta walk. You can walk.
And listen to the talk here for the Ohio Brutes trying to get going into their last round. Lauren Sheehan and Cece Piper working to get back outside here for the Ohio Brutes, who have now ceded their advantage to Renewed Strength CrossFit as we begin this 4th and final round.
Impressive adjustment to make the push inside when they're not tethered together.
Yeah, that was terrific. I mean, that's a team that really thought out a strategy. That was planned.
And I wonder when that was planned. Like, was that something that you talk about ahead of time, or on that last lap? Are they thinking, you know what, we're going to make our move when we get inside?
Yeah, no, those are all advanced plans. I mean, the thing is that the thing that athletes hate to do is last-minute plans. Like somebody on the team is like, hey, let's do this. No. Here is our plan. And we all agreed on our plan. And so part of the problem would be is like to execute on what they just did. Let's remember, that is without a doubt the hardest part of this whole event was what you just saw coming into that last transition, and they decided to take that as an advantage and make a move.
These are the only 2 teams that are on their 4th and final lap. 3rd place now just coming inside the gym.
I believe that's Blue City.
It is.
Led by Taylor Stride.
That is Taylor Stride on the right of your screen. Spent last year with CrossFit Mayhem Independence, now moving to grab that final sandbag. Stephen Wallace behind them as well. So Blue City, upon exiting Orleans Arena, will be in 3rd place on their final round here. You know, Tommy, it's interesting because we talk about Renewed Strength and when they tried to make that pass outside, and hey, does that break your spirits? But now you look back at that moment and you say, yeah, maybe that was crushing, but all along they must have known, hey, we're going to make a push still to come here. And it's interesting to think about the psychology that may have been going on in hindsight.
Well, let's face it, it happens all the time in sport where you are behind, and what you do is you test the person in front of you, and you push that pace, and you soften them. And part of doing that repeatedly is that you're testing them, and they're going to react. But if you keep softening one time, they won't react. And then you know you have them.
And his team Invictus making their way back outside with their final round of sandbags.
You know, it's interesting watching different strides that people have. And one of the things that is an unfair advantage is for the women. This weight is heavy. And if we look at the amount of weight that they're adding relative to their body weight, it impacts their stride.
There's Team Invictus in 2nd place overall coming in. They were the #1 seed at the beginning of the event. Jen Ryan, Brittany Rice, Eric Carmody, and Jorge Fernandez. And there is Renewed Strength continuing to push up front. They were an 18th overall at the beginning of the day. Tommy, these are precious points. Renewed Strength had an 18th place finish in Event 1, a 13th place finish in Event 2. That leads to an 18th place standing overall. And we're still early enough in the competition that if you throw down 100 points right now, you're immediately back into the mix.
3 events on day 2. Plenty of opportunity to start chewing up ground. You know, 100 points event wins is exactly how you do that.
This is still a fairly young team and an inexperienced team. Cy Holt is the 2nd athlete from the front. just 22 years old. This is his first year competing in the Open. Jason Zobot, their other male athlete with the black hat up front, this is his first year competing in the Open at 23 years of age. And it's one of those things where this is a sport where experience matters, and you're gaining experience big time on a stage like this with every passing event. Here on this 6K ruck, 4 laps with the weight increasing on your back. The first weight is in the ruck that each of these athletes are wearing, and then that is added onto by the sandbags they've been picking up on each trip through the arena. Now we do have a 40-minute time cap as well, so 8 minutes left to go from what all of these teams have to finish. Also to note, Renewed Strength just switched up their order, Chris. What does that tell you strategically about who is running where, not just in the race, but within your team?
Yeah, so that's the thing is, look at that. That's what teamwork is. He's pushing. He's giving her some assistance. I'm here for you.
You ever seen that Facebook meme where they show you the wolf who leads the pack doesn't lead from out front, but the head of the pack is always in the back? That's that personified.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Your leader makes sure that nobody straggles behind. It's no man left behind.
Well, and that's the thing is that when you are suffering and you know you're the weakest on the team, the last thing that you want is all the other teammates to constantly look back at you and go, are you good? You know, come on, are you good? Let's go, let's go, let's go. And it's like, that person's going as hard as they possibly can. So by allowing that weaker athlete in front and you're behind, it allows them to establish their own rhythm. And part of it is that if you're a great team, you recognize you have 4 more events to go. Why would you want to demoralize your weakest in this particular event? Because they're going to carry that into the next event. So allow them the freedom to get out in front and establish their own rhythm. And then you stay behind in more of a supporting role. That's a very important part of being a team, is to not make the weaker athlete feel like they are that weaker athlete.
Those are the Ohio Brutes. They're in second place still, but they are lagging on the pace right now.
And one of the athletes actually had to sit down for a second. It looks like they are in some serious trouble there. You could see it in the back of the screen just a few moments ago. One of the athletes having to sit on the ground, get some assistance. It looks like CC Piper may have maybe come out a little bit too hot in these first 3.
Well, and that's the thing, is that once you elevate your own core temperature, there is no relief. That's why what we saw was she didn't want to leave the air conditioning. That was an athlete that had gone over the top, and she needed to find a way to recover. The problem is that she didn't slow down before those issues came on. And so now what you're seeing is the body is shutting down. It's forcing her to stop.
And from a health standpoint, this is a race, but when is CC Piper truly in trouble? And here comes the medical team to take a look at the Ohio Brutes as Renewed Strength CrossFit just continues to grow their lead.
And you hope she can recover, because there's, you know, you want obviously her health. You want to make sure that's taken care of. Competitively, that becomes second at this point with the Ohio Brutes, who are in 6th place coming into the day.
I mean, this is Tommy, she can't stand, and she's going to try to give this a go.
So this is the area that worries me as a coach, because part of it is these athletes now, and she's on autopilot. She is making her body do it.
I don't know about this time. Like, this just, part of this is tough. There's some grit and going in there, but Renewed Strength CrossFit continues to push up front.
Yep, loss of motor control. Look at her legs. She's flailing her legs.
So Renewed Strength in first place here, again trying to make a move, 18th overall after 2 events. And they've got a big enough lead to account for all of that here in event 3.
And at this point, it just seems like it's energy conservation for Renewed Strength. They have a nice lead. They can see on these switchbacks where they are relative to the field. And for a team that's clearly proficient at running, this is also a huge advantage for the recovery game as far as having 2 more events today, knowing that they're going to have 100 points and they can throttle back a little bit and maybe save some in the tank for later on.
I mean, this is a massive boost for them. It's a massive boost. The fact is that they're now cruising in on one of the most challenging parts of this event, and they're making it easy because they're so far in front. They're right now in a recovery phase. They're in no rush. There's no mental, emotional stress.
Well, let's talk about that for a second here, Chris, because you get no points for winning this event by 1.5 miles. Right. You get 100 points if you're in first, and 100 points if you're in first by a second.
Yep.
So knowing that there are 2 more events, do they say, Like, we don't want to make it so close that someone can catch us, but let's save energy here.
Right, so the one thing that they need to be worried about is the person behind. And if that person behind feels like we can catch them, then you're going to give that second place team power. And you never want that. You want them to feel like they were crushed, demoralized, because they need right now to establish their dominance because they're, 18th place. They need to start getting points. And they'll accumulate a lot here, but they've got to think about event 4 and 5 today.
If you need help in your recovery, CBDMD is the CBD that you can trust. Visit cbdmd.com/CrossFit and use the code CrossFit today for 30% off. That is CBDMD, the CBD you can trust. We are 3 minutes away from the cap in this event. And Tommy, this is miraculous because I think we're going to get a ton of teams capped.
And Renewed Strength just got a nice look at the rest of the field on that last turn before you get to the fence line here where you can see some fans piling up. They had a clear view of just how far ahead they were of the rest of the field. So the time cap is almost irrelevant at this point. They know that they have a comfortable lead. They can kind of accurately gauge it, get one nice look before they come into the stadium.
Yeah, they're coming back into the stadium. So this is done, salted, and dusted. An event victory here in event 3.
What a boost.
And they're trying to make a statement this season. Ariel Lowen has already qualified for the CrossFit Games by winning the Granite Games a couple of weeks ago from Renewed Strength CrossFit. So now you've got their team on display here at the West Coast Classic and a chance for the group from Midland, Texas to announce their presence in the CrossFit world with authority here in 2021.
That's awesome. Good for them. Wow.
So it is Jezik DeVoe, Zobot, and Holt, Renewed Strength CrossFit out of Midland, Texas, who will pick up an Event 3 victory, their first event win here at the 2021 West Coast Classic, and they do it in absolute dominating fashion. Tommy, they may be the only team that doesn't get capped at this juncture.
Wow. I mean, look at them. They look fresh. That's energy right there. Watch the other teams that come in after this. They're not going to look like that.
I don't know if there's going to be other teams that come in after this, Chris.
It looks like Blue City is the second place team, and they're just now making the final turn as well. It's going to be close trying to get underneath the cap.
Now, you have to imagine that they have a timer on one of their bodies. There's not necessarily a clock for them to look at outside, but they have to be aware personally of where they are in this mix and whether or not they know that they have a minute left to go to get back inside this arena and to the finish line.
And while it might be a personal goal to finish underneath the cap, they're
still in second.
They're still in second. They're not going to get any extra points, and hopefully they got a good look on that last turn as well to what their lead is relative to the third place athlete. Just try and maintain here, like Chris said earlier.
And then a massive second place finish it would be. That's more than 90 points for second place. You've already got a fifth. You've already got a fourth. You're in third overall. Top 5 teams get tickets to the CrossFit Games, and Blues City putting themselves in a position where they can continue to create some separation with the rest of the field.
And more importantly, they're ahead of the other 4 teams inside the top 5 right now, so you know you're going to pick up points on Invictus. You're going to pick up points on Backcountry Black. You know you're going to gain some points on your lead over Team Man-Made and Invictus Unconquerable. So a strong performance from Blue City.
Now it just comes down to whether or not you finish in second place capped or if you finish in second place finishing. There are 5 seconds left for Blue City as they enter the arena, and with 1 second, they will finish meters away from finishing the course. But it is a second place finish for Blues City Athletics and a resounding, dominating win on the 6K ruck run for Renewed Strength CrossFit.
I mean, you've got to be impressed with that victory. That is incredible. The lead that they had and the consistency from start to finish. That's a team that's really well organized. They're consistent. They're working as a unit. Very well done. Wow.
And you can start to see the impact of this event now as teams still out on the course, just trying to just get rid of as much of the load on the backpack, the sandbags, get the shoes off, get anything that you can, any remnant of that event away from you.
And here's the thing. This is the end of the first period. We'll take an intermission, and the second period is coming up. This is the first of 3 events for the teams today. So recovery, however you figure it out, is going to be absolutely massive over the next couple of hours.
And Chris, from your experience, what would recovery look like here at this point?
So part of it is that this was a very high intensity effort. Everyone's heart rate got, if not hit their maximum, it went right up next to their maximum. And so they've got an accumulation of lactic acid in their bodies. The thing is that lactic acid will go away in about, let's say, an hour and a half. But what they want to do is accelerate it by doing some kind of an active recovery protocol, getting on like an assault bike and doing something where it allows the muscle to flush that system. The other is getting a good carb replacement in the 30 seconds, or the next 30 minutes.
It started with an absolute mosh pit, and then very quickly figured itself out here, Tommy, and Renewed Strength jumped in front. They were leading the pack for a little while. They fell to second place, but they were always there, and then they made this incredible push when they got inside on the last round, going from round 3 to 4.
And I was impressed by Renewed Strength's ability to manage the throttle here. You know, they made an attempt to pass the Ohio Brutes, who were in first going into the final lap. But you know what? Didn't panic, decided to recollect and make a push on the transition to the final sandbag. We saw one of the members of Ohio Brutes struggling when she came in for that final sandbag, and it was enough for Renewed Strength really to put some distance by the time they even left the building, and they walk away with 100 points and the only team to finish underneath the cap.
And we'll figure out the strategy behind that from Renewed Strength. Lauren, Courtney, Cy, and Jason are down with Nikki Brazier.
Congrats, guys. The only team to finish and cross the finish line successfully. What was it about this event? Where do you think you made up time, you were able to save sort of, you know, those precious moments to cross the finish line first?
I think it was really in the transitions. Thankfully, our amazing coach, Levi Kirk, practiced transitions over and over and over again as we went through this. We were running around our gym outside just practicing those, and that was our strategy for quick transitions.
I know you said it's hot, but that's something that you guys are pretty used to, right, coming from Texas?
Yeah, I think it's even hotter down there right now, but we just practice. That event is who's mentally strong, and we didn't break, and we knew we could push it. We trusted our training. We have our family here. They pushed us, and we just wanted to do it for all of them, you know?
Yeah. Now, this is definitely one way to set up day 2 of the competition. You have very different events coming up, including weightlifting. How do you recover from here to move on?
I'm going to try and go sit down and figure out how I'm supposed to find my legs again.
Our strength is renewed.
That's right. Well, congratulations, guys. Great way to start day 2. Thank you.
Thank you.
You know that Cy Holt had been waiting to say that for the longest time, by the way. Tip of the cap, Renewed Strength CrossFit. A phenomenal victory to start day 3 for the teams here at the West Coast Classic. Much more to come as we continue our coverage in the Mojave Desert.
The CrossFit Games are returning to Madison, Wisconsin, and you can be there to see all the action. Ticket packages are on sale now. Choose between Festival only or a Festival plus Coliseum package to ensure that you are on hand to witness the best athletes in the world compete for the title of Fittest on Earth. Be part of the celebration live. Head to games.crossfit.com to purchase your tickets today.
Entertaining all the player hating imitators who imitate us, emulators, but they can't debate us. Why even losing? You can see that I'm a winner, baby. Y'all just don't know the places I go. I've got my flow, my gut, my soul, my whole inside's alive with that glow. Y'all just don't know the places I go. I've got my flow, my gut, my soul, my whole inside's alive with that glow. Y'all just don't know.
It's the CrossFit Games semifinals, the final weekend of the semifinals here in fabulous Las Vegas, the West Coast Classic. It is event 3, day 2, here on a Saturday. The women's standings coming into this 6K ruck run. Carrie Pierce, the greatest woman from America ever to compete in this sport, is in first place right now with a 12-point lead over Danielle Brandon, her teammate here in Vegas. Danny Spiegel, Bethany Shadburn, Reagan Huckabee in those 5 spots to go to the games. The blue line differentiates the athletes that will qualify for the last chance online qualifier. That's Tolamora Aquino, Alex Smith, and Kyle Bernier on the men's side. The teenager, young 19-year-old Dallin Pepper, leads the way in a stacked men's field. I said 6K ruck run for event number 3. Let's talk about the 6K ruck run. 4 laps here at Orleans Arena. You'll start with a ruck on your back for the women 10 pounds, men 20 pounds, and then as you come in for each lap, you will pick up the sandbags pictured on the ground. That will add the weight to your back to 30, 40, and 50 pounds, or 40, 50, and 60 pounds. This event was supposed to happen originally a little bit later in the day, but we're in the Mojave Desert, 115-degree high. So currently it's 94 degrees. We moved it a little bit up earlier in the day to relieve some of that heat stress on these athletes. With that, we welcome you high atop Orleans Arena. Tommy Marquez, Joel Gaudette, and you might know this guy as the subject matter expert in the sport of fitness when it comes to aerobic capacity, Chris Hinshaw. Tommy, should be a good one here.
Absolutely. Chris, we had a chance to actually test this event yesterday, and we've already seen the teams go so far earlier this morning. What are some key points of performance for this particular event and how stout it is?
You've got to have a plan. You really have to have a plan, and a lot of athletes, they panic here. Just think of the first 5 steps. Get out and get some clean air. That's the number one. And then allow the body to settle. That's the first thing they need to be thinking about.
And strategy for each particular lap as you adjust this load and the transition, what are some key points there?
So part of it is that it is hot outside and it's very cool in here. And they're going to be surprised at that transition. The key is not staying in that air-conditioned environment and enjoying it. You're going to want to. But you got to fight against that and get back out in that heat and get this workout done.
Chris, let's talk about the elephant in the room. It's hot outside. How does that impact this?
So that's going to be a big impact. I mean, part of it is that it's 94 degrees, and when we did it yesterday, I redlined. I mean, I hit my maximum heart rate on my 3rd lap. It is a very difficult event. This is a true test of endurance, stamina, but also grit.
Sean Sweeney, ever the entertainer. It looks like Randy Savage, Tommy Marquez, is about to run this race right now.
And you know, I actually trained with Sweeney's coach, Jacob Sipkin, growing up in California, and one of the things that's very unique about where we grew up is it's an agricultural forward place. Spent a lot of time in the agriculture industry, out in the sun a long time. This is a little tip and trick that you see people working out in the fields that keep the skin covered, wear light colors, cover the head, reduce the skin exposure.
This is going to be an absolute free-for-all here for about 10 seconds. The men and the women are running together. There are 60 people about to leave Orleans Arena and fighting for positioning. We said this in the teams event. The race starts when you start, so you are all chip-timed. If you are first out of the gate, you are not necessarily in first place. This will all sort itself out. But when you cross the starting line, that is when your clock starts.
And Chris, you mentioned, you want to get out early, get some clean air in front of you on this mass start. For these athletes that maybe aren't able to do that towards the middle of the pack, how are you navigating these very choppy waters early on?
So part of it is that it's going to take their heart rate about 90 seconds to get it to that optimal cadence. And so part that they have to do is they have to get out and keep pushing for that first 90 seconds. What also will happen as your heart rate is escalating is that your body temperature is going to rise. I mentioned earlier that I felt the heat after about 4 minutes in this event. So part with these athletes, no matter where they're actually positioned in this event, they're going to have to allow their system, their cardiorespiratory system, and also their temperature to elevate to a sustainable level. And that's going to take them somewhere between 90 seconds and 4 minutes. And so every athlete is going to be experiencing that. Where am I ultimately going to settle into a pace that I can sustain until I want to make my move for the finish?
Tommy and Chris, when we look at this field on both the men's and the women's side, you're thinking, all right, it's a 6K run. The ruck, though, is the ultimate equalizer, the ruck and the sandbags. You run down the athletic backgrounds of some of these people. I'm thinking Andra Stearns on the men's side. Sydney Wells is an all-conference caliber track athlete from the Southeastern Conference. But the ruck and the weight becomes the equalizer. How does that change how you respond for a normal track athlete in this type of a running and aerobic capacity event?
Well, so just take me and Tommy. Tommy crushed me yesterday. I mean, let's just come clean on it. But Tommy weighs, what, 225?
220. I'll take 225, though.
Okay, I'm 165. But I'm pretty confident on a track that I could smash Tommy with no weight. I'm pretty confident. And so that's the thing, is that you put some weight on a guy that weighs 165, it is a bigger impact on me than it is for somebody bigger. My finesse, my technique, my skill set goes out the window when you put 60 pounds on me. Or for Tommy, it's like a walk in the park.
So Tommy, with that laid as the foreground, what do you think going into this event as far as who might stand out and people you're looking for to separate themselves early?
Well, there really is a sweet spot, kind of talking to what Chris was just saying, is, Chris is a little bit better runner than me, significantly better runner than me.
Thank you, Tommy.
I can run. I do like running. But also, like he said, I'm a little bit bigger athlete. So maintaining my posture and the structure of my running and my technique with this load is a little bit easier, percentage-wise. So you have to look for some of the bigger athletes that are comfortable on their feet, maybe have some running background. You see a big athlete on your screen right now, Matt DeLugos, hanging in third. Nice big strides, looks comfortable. You take a great example from the games in 2019. We saw Lucas Hogberg, Joshua Wickstrup out of Germany, two larger athletes in the field, but also good aerobically. They were able to manage the load over time and still keep a more traditional, I would say, run pace and technique across the entire event.
Well, I mean, that's the thing, is that you have to train for this type of an event. You can't just train running. Remember, if you want to get good at something, you have to do that something. And just because you're running, that doesn't mean that you're going to be good with a ruck, because with a ruck, your whole stride cadence changes, right? Your stride length gets a little bit shorter. So how are you going to maintain speed? Well, what you have to do is you have to increase your stride frequency, the number of steps that you take per minute. So a good example of that is like Tia Toomey. Tia is incredible with a ruck. She's taking somewhere around 185 to 190 steps in a minute. When she runs without a ruck, she's at about 175 steps a minute. So dramatically different, but she's got a longer length of stride without the ruck. She trains both. So just because you're a great runner doesn't mean that you're going to be good at doing this event.
Start to see the field pass by the water stations as they continue to move. Better than 90 degrees outside, so there is a chance to replenish yourself as you continue through this 6K course. Saw James Sprague near the front of the pack for the men. There is Matt DeLugos as well, currently in third place, trying to effort a little bit of a pass early on Sprague in the darker red shirt. Chris, the thing that you'll notice with these athletes on this first lap, because the only weight is the ruck, they have free use of their hands. As soon as they come back in the arena, they will pick up a sandbag, throw that on their back to add some weight. They also will have to obviously hold that. They lose the use of their hands. What is the impact in terms of running technique, in terms of pacing, in terms of how you're about to attack this race when you lose that ability to pump yourself forward?
Well, so the first thing that I'm seeing with them, and everybody should see this, is they're standing tall. They're more upright. They're not hinging at the waist. And when you see an athlete start hinging on a waist, that is the #1 sign that they're experiencing fatigue. And the reason why you don't want to hinge at the waist is your power in running comes from the hips. And so if you're hinging, you take away that power. The other thing is that it makes it much more difficult to bring the knee forward when you're hinging. So the swing phase of your stride, bringing your leg forward, it just creates more challenge. And so although you're getting bundled by the weight, it's making your running form create a slower speed. And that's one of the things that you want to look at right away. But the arms, that's essential. The arms are a balance to the legs. You create a better balance by using arms. We'll get into the arms after this transition, because when they come in here, this will be a tell. I mean, this is a very important strategic point. If it comes down to a sprint, you can make up easily 5 seconds in transition time. Easily.
And James Sprague trying to make a pass here as he comes into the arena. Former teen games athlete competing at the elite level for the first time here in 2021.
Look at the squeeze.
It should be noted that
boom.
James actually won the ruck
yes.
at the 2019 games for the 16 to 17 division. So this is one of the events he had circled coming into the weekend where he can make up some points, especially off of last night when he had that costly no rep on the legless rope climbs that drove him down the leaderboard.
It is a little bit more weight than it was as a teenager at those games in 2019, but a race is a race and an event is an event, and this is a wheelhouse event for him. See Noah Olson in the black shirt picked up that sandbag, and these athletes are not wasting any time. They are picking up the sandbags and going. Cole Sager throwing that on his back and moving out of the arena in the blue shorts. And again, it comes down to jockeying for position as everybody gets squeezed back into the bottleneck coming back out of Orleans Arena.
This is where it gets real. So as soon as you throw the sandbag on, now what we do is we not only have our pack, but we've got a second variable, which is the sandbag.
James Sprague is now the new leader, and we saw one person, we've talked about hand pumping, we saw one person go with a one-hand hold on the ruck and using the open arm to continue moving themselves forward. And the weight has increased. For the women, it is now 30 pounds on your back. For the men, it is 40 pounds on your back. 20 in the ruck, 20 in the sandbag. Or Chris, as you alluded to earlier, the concrete bag. You said it was hard to get a feel on how the sand was moving or to make it move on your shoulders.
That's why what you want to do is, I mean, the grip pieces where the fingers are and where you see all these athletes holding, they're consistent from one weighted bag to the next. And so your grip positioning location stays the same. That's really a cool feature about the product. But it wasn't as pliable. It wasn't as movable that you would think. It doesn't wrap around your neck. It sits there almost like a log, which makes it challenging to run without holding onto the bag. And a lot of people, they're like, well, what's the value of that? Like allowing your arms to swing, like what's the value? Well, the fact is that if you are not moving your muscles, then those muscles cannot consume that lactate as a fuel and remove it from the body. So essentially what you're doing is you're minimizing the opportunity for lactic acid to get out of your body. And part of it is if you don't get it out, then it ultimately is going to accumulate. And if it gets too high, it will interfere with the muscle's ability to function. And essentially what it will do is it will force you to slow down or stop. And that's what you don't want to happen.
You're looking at the women's leaders here, Carly Lucas and Maddie Edwards. Carly Lucas is in the front in the green top, the firefighter. Maddie Edwards, the former professional soccer player in Ireland, just behind her in the white top. Those are the two women's leaders. This is an absolute exhausting event, though. We already saw it for the teams, and we saw the way that the heat and the length and the weight and the distance impacted some of the athletes. Let's go down to the floor with Nikki Brazier. We do have a medical update on that note.
Yeah, you guys did see Cece Piper from the Ohio Brutes team take a little bit of a stumble out there, out on the floor. She is being treated by the medical staff right now, more than likely for heat exhaustion, though we have not gotten an official diagnosis quite yet. Now, Cece is a PA. That's what she does as her job, so she was fully aware of what was going on for her, and her teammates were saying that she was fully sort of with it mentally, but she could feel her body kind of giving out, which is why she did get up and try to attempt to finish the race. But at the end of the day, after the time cap, she was scooped up by the medical team and is currently being evaluated.
Nikki, thank you. Yes, CC Piper does work at a local emergency room in Lima, Ohio, so it's actually an interesting note to add to that, with being self-aware of what is happening to you as you're continuing to go through it and try to fight through the event.
I find it always interesting with competing, right? In training, what we do is we force our bodies to go ahead and our brain just makes us do it. Like, do it. And then what we do is we finally show up at a competition, and our muscles are now trained, and all they want to do is they want to go out there and fly. And then the brain is the one that sits there and goes, hold on. Let's kind of calm ourselves down. And there's this mismatch occurring. And you have to have experience in competitions to know about that. That's where veterans come in. It's like they know that. It's expected. And they know that the brain can force the body to do certain things that are above your limit.
That is your men's leader right now, James Sprague, just 19 years of age, leading the way here, trying to pick up his first event win of the weekend. And Tommy, it comes at a critical time because of what he went through in the thruster rope climb to end the day yesterday.
Yeah, anyone who was watching will remember James was actually at the front of the pack of his heat. He was winning the event, and then it came down to the final legless rope climb. At the end of that event, second to final rope climb in the round of 15, got a no rep, set him to the back of the pack. No rep started to pile up on the legless rope climbs. He ended up finishing near last in his heat. So needs to make a move on Saturday, and knowing that he had won the ruck in 2019 in the teenage division, this is a great event for him to do so.
We are a little bit more than a quarter of the way through this 40-minute time-capped event here. A broadcast today brought to you in part by the U.S. Army. What's your warrior? You can find out more by visiting goarmy.com. Sprague continuing to experiment a little bit with the placement of that bag on his shoulders. Oh, he was drinking water with the one hand, so moved the bag out of necessity to free up his one arm. 27th place finish in event 1, 28th in event 2. That gives him 29th overall coming in, so these are valuable points, both for him, but he can also steal some points from people that are in currently more contentious positions and may need those points at the top of the leaderboard.
No doubt, and Chris, we saw James just take a sip of water. One thing we haven't talked about so far is fluid replenishment in the midst of an event. Is there a set time, or is there a cadence, or maybe when you want to try and go for the aid station, get some water back in your body?
So the rule of thumb is normally if it's an event over 30 minutes, water would have value. Anything under 30 minutes, it wouldn't have value, other than it's very dry out there. I mean, part of it is, yes, it's hot, but it's dry. And by having a little moisture in your mouth, it makes it easier to breathe. And so part of it might be that they're just trying to get some moisture back in their mouth. That's all they're trying to do.
How about this? 4th place overall, Maddie Edwards. Pull a little Sam Briggs here on the run outside.
I mean, look at that focus. Wow.
Maddie Edwards, a 27-year-old out of CrossFit NWA in Bentonville, Arkansas. Actually an interesting story because she was in Ireland at the start of the pandemic last year and was going to spend the summer abroad. She had been living in Ireland for a few years, decided to come home because of the pandemic, and made it back to America 3 days before they closed the border, and lived in Arkansas where her family had moved. She had never lived there before, so brand new place where she has to adapt to train as a professional athlete basically in the middle of a pandemic. Still does enough to get herself here to a semifinal at the West Coast Classic.
That's amazing.
Right now she looks great.
Yep, real good.
And this is soccer strength. We talk about track athletes and how they would handle an event like this, but when you look at team sports athletes, who may be the better conditioned or the most conditioned of those? Chris, soccer athletes are running miles and miles at a time in a competition under high-stress environments.
Yep, they're very well conditioned, but they also are conditioned through generating massive amounts of speed over and over again, power output. This is a power output workout.
James Sprague, cardio is his jam, and he is well out in front of the entire field as he comes in to pick up his second sandbag. The weight will change now for James to 50 pounds overall, and he'll throw that thing on his back and head back out without really taking much of a break at all.
That was impressive. There was no, unexpected pauses. He was rhythmic through the whole thing, maintaining his cadence, his movement patterns. He was good. He's still in the game.
So here's Edwards leading the pack for the women. Sean Sweeney.
Look at that. Wow, that was a good transition.
Yeah, just picked that thing up and flew. Cole Sager coming through in the blue shorts as well for the men. There's Noah Olson in the black shirt. Danielle Brandon coming back in for the women.
Interesting. Chris, I'm curious. You see both Maddie and Sean wearing white. You hear a lot of, discussion around the color choice in terms of reflecting heat when you're out there. We saw Noah wearing all black. Does that really make a difference in the long term?
Yeah, I don't understand the all black. I also don't understand, like, in this short of an event, wearing long sleeves and you see some women wearing the pants, and part of the problem is that it's going to take some time for the body to start sweating. And so that clothing is going to retain that heat. It's almost like hopping into a sleeping bag. It's going to take some time for that moisture to get into that fabric to create more of a cooling effect. That confuses me a little bit. It would be different if they were over in Kona doing Ironman and they're on a 112-mile bike ride across the lava fields. I get it, wearing a white long-sleeve shirt. That makes sense to me.
So it's about time duration.
It's about time duration, and also just like the body's, what it does in accumulating heat. I mean, part of it is that you want to have the body's ability to dissipate that heat, especially in an event like this where it gets more and more difficult.
Did you say 112 miles across a lava field?
Yeah, 112 miles across the lava field. There's not. Yep, and there's a saying in Hawaii. That's what makes the Kona Ironman so difficult, is that there's a lot of wind. But there's a saying, it's a wind that blows both directions. So normally when you do a bike ride, you go out and it's a tailwind, and then you come back, it's a headwind. No, in Kona, it's a headwind out and a headwind back.
Kind of like your grandpa's stories about walking uphill both ways to school.
Precisely.
So you can see right now from that view, from the left side to the right, it's slightly downhill, and it's slight, but it's a surprising benefit. It restores your mental strength when you experience that downhill. It's like, woo, this is a rest, which is shocking, but it shows you how tough this event is, that you look and you see that downhill and it's like, I can't wait till I get this uphill done and I can go back and recover on that downhill. That's how hard this is.
James Sprague continues to lead the way for the men as we go down onto the floor. Check in with Nikki Brazier. She is with one of the men of the hour when it comes to the coaching profession this weekend, the head of Underdog Athletics, Justin Kotler.
Justin, you have so many different athletes out there of all different levels and abilities, different strengths. How do you approach training for an event like this one singular running modality?
The thing about the ruck run, and we've had a little bit of experience with it in the past with Carrie and Bethany and Danielle doing it a couple of years ago. And it's really about mental toughness. We wanted to be aggressive that first lap, and then from there, it's really about holding your position and being as tough mentally as possible. I had a great talk with Chris yesterday, Hinshaw, and we had practiced with the idea of being aggressive in that first lap, and it was nice to get his take on it, and obviously, I think we've done the right thing so far. We're doing pretty well, so we've just got to hold our position and be tough throughout the rest of the race.
Obviously, no matter how you practice or train for something like this, there are factors that can change everything on game day. The heat being one of them. How do you guys handle? I mean, you train here, so you know this environment.
We got a little home court advantage here, right? I was curious to see how everyone else would respond, and honestly, this early in the morning, the heat's not as bad, but honestly, Vegas is at elevation. Dry air. It's a little bit different than what most people are used to. We've been here a while, so I think we've got a little bit of an advantage, but still, the conditions are tough. You got to be tough.
We've been talking a lot this weekend about the importance of training camps and with the athletes surrounding themselves with other like-minded individuals. But is there at all any difficulty when it comes to all of these athletes sort of vying for the same spots, the same podium?
Yes, but I think the athletes that decide to come to a training camp, right, they understand what they're getting themselves into, and they understand there's a give and take there, right? There's just no way to recreate the intensity of that atmosphere by yourself. And ultimately, they understand that, yes, at the end of the day, I'm going to end up competing against, essentially my family, right? Because that's what it is. It turns into a family. But there's a respect there that while, I want to beat this person, right, I still respect the shit out of them. So it's a good situation.
Great. Do you have any predictions as to how this is all going to shake out?
Man, so we've actually been lucky. The guy who's winning, James, has come and trained with us a few times. He looks great, but Matt's up in the front, so he looks great, and the girls are all hanging tough. So I think today is going to be interesting. It's moving day, so you're going to see a big fluctuation on the board. It's going to be interesting to me to see how people recover for the Triple G chipper after this, because honestly, I think this is going to change a lot of people's weekends. So I'm curious to see it.
Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
Nikki, thank you, and Justin as well. And Tommy, just for the perspective, when you look back at 2019 and how those underdog athletics women did, this, of course, is a revisited event, as this entire weekend is. Bethany Shadburn was the best of those three that trained with Justin. She was in 8th place. Carrie Pierce finished 13th. Danielle Brandon was in 23rd in that event that was won by Emily Rolfe in 27 minutes and 9 seconds. Tia Toomey was in 2nd. Kristen Holta 3rd. Sam Briggs also in under 28 minutes. She was in 4th.
And a little perspective there. Remember, we had a massive event field that particular year. There was 50 athletes competing, so all 3 of those women in the top half of that ruck.
And what's interesting to note is that of the 50 that competed in that ruck, 49 of them did finish. So we'll see what happens in terms of the time cap here. We are a little bit past the halfway mark. 21:10 into a 40-minute event as James Sprague just continues to run. How about Cole Sager? He has made his way to the front of the pack in the blue shorts just behind. And then Matt DeLugos has just kind of been in 3rd place the whole time. Chris, biding his time. Do you start to make a move? You talked about the 3rd lap being a big one. When does maybe Matt DeLugos try to make an effort here? Although it looks like he has now been passed again, falling back into 4th or 5th.
I think that 1st place is vulnerable here. There is a lot of power with this group. This is a significant group, and they're working together. They're grinding through this lap, and then they're going to go to battle in that final 4th lap. I think that, you know what, they're going to catch 1st place. Someone in this 2nd group is going to win.
You know what's interesting, too? We just talked about the long sleeves and all of the extra protective clothing. Sean Sweeney began with a hood and a headband. He is now down to just long sleeves.
You know, I do that sometimes in long track workouts, but I do it where I take off more and more clothes to lighten my amount of weight that I'm carrying later into the workout. He's doing it because he's overheating. I mean, that was one of the things, and I would think he would understand that. Temperature is going to matter, and the last thing you're going to want to do is lock in that heat with long sleeve.
So Sprague turns as he comes back into the arena for what will be his 4th and final lap here, with still 18 minutes almost left to go here. Heard Justin talk about how his team would recover after this, going into what comes next. The teams will go next. At 10 o'clock, we'll have our next event. So almost 3 hours from now is when the teams will come back into it for their events 4 and 5. The women then go just past noon. The men go just past 1. So you have a recovery window. How do you manage a recovery window of that size most effectively?
I mean, the first 30 minutes is essential. The 30 minutes after this event, you must have a carbohydrate replacement program, some kind of a protocol.
Fast acting?
Right, so like just some kind of, not a lot of high concentrate of sugar, right? So it's got to assimilate well into the bloodstream, but you also have to have a small amount of protein. So this transition is really a key thing. And looking at his body language,
starting to change.
So what I notice is his number of steps that he's taking per minute. His stride frequency is slowing down. He's hurting.
And Cole Sager's getting stronger.
Right. So look at where they're taking bags, always from the front, right? They're trying to take that forward position.
A little bit of jockeying here. Chris, one thing, and this is maybe a little bit different strategy. We heard Kotler talk about being aggressive in that 1st lap, and I'm curious your thoughts. Personally, when we did this yesterday, I was a little bit more conservative in that 1st mile and tried to pick off athletes as we started to gather speed because I felt comfortable with the heavier load. Is that something maybe some athletes like Cole Sager or some of these bigger guys might employ? Is there a sweet spot there between coming out hard in that 1st lap or maybe trying banking on your conditioning in the 3rd and 4th?
So, you know, you mentioned Cole Sager. Cole Sager, he has an incredible tolerance to lactate. So he is a true power-based athlete, and he is able to make his muscles stay turned on under extreme high doses of lactic acid. So that's where he becomes a threat in that last 2 minutes. That's where he is a weapon because of his ability to tolerate high doses of lactate. You know, Bethany, so she was my pick to win this event, and it's interesting that she went out aggressive, and to be able to stay aggressive in this event, but then settle into a sustainable pace. I mean, that's where the experience comes in. This event, as far as with this final lap, with this heavy weight, you got to be able to hang in there until that remaining 2 minutes where you say to yourself, you know what? I think it's time to take a substantial risk and go into a non-sustainable pace and make my push to the finish line. And if I time it right, my body will shut down just as I cross the line. That is a very risky thing to do. But you know what? If you want to be a champion, you got to do it.
Couple of notes on Bethany Shadburn. Number one, she is your new leader on the women's side, so pushing herself to the front of the pack. Number two, mad props. She opened the water with her mouth. So
veteran move right there.
Veteran and impressive. But number three, you know, Chris, you said she was your pick to do well and win this event coming into it. Maybe we should have seen that one coming, because we talked in the beginning about how different athletic backgrounds play into an event like this. Soccer, track, things of that nature. Bethany Shadburn has run 4 triathlons.
A lot of experience, and so part of it is that if you don't do long distance events like this would be considered a long distance event. I mean, in track and field, they consider distance 3,000 meters and higher. This is real distance, especially with the time domain. The problem is if you're always doing short time domain workouts, you don't understand how negative thought will propagate. How do you control negative thought? And so in this event, everybody is trying to battle that negative thought and not allow it to take hold. If you have experience in the triathlon world, long distance events, you're aware that as soon as negative thought takes hold, you cannot get back out of it. It's now your new pattern of behavior. So that knowledge that she has is a weapon for her, and that's one of the reasons why she was a pick to win.
And she's worked a lot on her mental game. As you look at James Sprague continuing to lead on the men's side here. This event brought to us in part, and our coverage brought to us in part by CBDMD. The CBD you can trust. Visit cbdmd.com/CrossFit and use code CrossFit for 30% off of your order today. That's CBDMD, the CBD you can trust.
And Chris, you were just talking about like the negative thought, and we've been talking about the mental toughness and the grind that we're into at this point in the final one. I don't know if you use this, but for me, I found it very helpful in that final lap to make some minor mental checkpoints that I use kind of to turn my psyche around, whether it was the downhill and you know, reaffirming that to myself that this is the downhill, this is the good part, or even honestly, when you're going downhill, you're facing the Las Vegas Strip, which was beautiful in the morning time. Any of those little mental checkpoints that you utilize to try and, you know, keep your mindset in a positive light.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing is like you want to be able to have those mental checkpoints to keep your head in the game. So one of the things, like I had a coach back in college days that would give us math equations in between intervals to help us think tactically, to be strategic, because the brain wants to shut off. And if you lose that ability to think strategically, then you're no longer is a contender. You got to keep the head in the game. And so like what you said, you want to play these little games like I'm going to run from lamppost to lamppost, and then I'm going to evaluate myself. But when you get to the next one, you say next lamppost. And what you're doing is always moving the bar. You've got to have that to keep the focus, because right now the suffering is on the highest level and they're wanting to walk. Every single person wants to walk there. And so what they're thinking is okay, you know what? I'll reevaluate that choice when I get to the turn.
And James Sprague, the overall leader, taking a page out of the Chris Hinshaw handbook, checking on his competition on the turn, taking utilization of the body turn to, you know, take a little peek over the shoulder and see where everyone else is at.
The other thing about Sprague is that, Chris, we said on lap 3, you thought that pack behind him would be able to make a move and catch him, and somebody from that second place pack would be able to win. Are you impressed by the fact that James Sprague has held everyone off to this point?
I'm impressed, but the threat really hasn't come. So keep in mind that they're not going to start making their true move until about 2 minutes.
Yeah, Cole Sager's making a move a little bit now. From this shot, you can see Sager starting to close that gap on him. And Cole's an interesting guy to do that. We're talking about a football fullback as his background, and a bigger athlete, a stronger athlete, able to come out here and potentially dominate an endurance event.
But keep in mind, what Cole is great at is his tolerance to lactate. So he can take on a massive amount of blood lactate and keep the muscles firing, where other athletes, what happens is the muscles start shutting down. So you're now at 99% capacity, then 98, and pretty soon you walk. What I'm looking at is the number of steps that they're taking. And so part of it is like, You look at our leader here, he's taking roughly 150 steps in a minute. And I mentioned before, when Tia runs with a ruck, she's at 185. That matters in terms of speed.
How do you do that math?
I was going to say, that's amazing that you were able to pick up the cadence that quickly.
Well, so all you do is you look at the clock and you count number of steps, 6 seconds, and multiply it by 10. It's fast.
There you go. Don't give away the secret.
I was impressed by the wizardry.
And this is the last downhill portion, the last significant downhill portion. Is that when you're going to make the move, try and take advantage of that momentum?
So in my opinion, what's happening is we're watching the leader. The leader knows they're behind. He's not going to turn around because that would be a show of weakness. And so what he's praying is that he slows down a little bit and they're not there. So now he just peaked. So part of it is that he knows they're going to make a move. And he's waiting for them to make a move and then he'll react.
This is about to get very interesting here as these athletes make the final turn.
Yeah, so look at his stride. He's picking it up. Now he's in full sprint.
The other thing to keep in mind in the back of your head is that this is all timed as to when these athletes crossed the start line. More than likely, they will finish in the order that they finished, but not necessarily, so you have to keep that piece in the back of your head. For what we're looking at, Sprague right now is trying to hold off Cole Sager. Sweeney has fallen a little bit off the charge here. Sprague coming towards the arena. Cole Sager can see the gap, and Cole Sager has a burst of speed. James Sprague trying to hold off Cole Sager at the end, and he just might not have enough. Cole Sager looks like he has just begun this ruck race, and he will edge out James Sprague towards the finish line. Cole Sager.
And here comes Sean Sweeney as well.
Sweeney will not catch Sprague. It was Sprague as the bell cow the entire way, and then like a thief in the night, Cole Sager at the last second collapses by the water cooler, veteran move, and he picks up what we presume will be an event victory here in the 6K ruck run.
That was awesome. Wow. Wow.
Brandon Luckett, the next athlete on the field.
And great recovery for Brandon Luckett after yesterday.
Huge turnaround from what looked like it could potentially be a weekend-ending injury on a wrist.
Bethany Shadburn, Matt DeLugos, the two teammates with Underdog Athletics. DeLugos trying to keep up with the point tally here on the men's side. Bethany Shadburn is your leader on the women's side. This would be a big victory for Bethany in terms of her progress this weekend. A 4th place and a 4th place in the first 2 events. Surprisingly, that has her in 4th place overall.
That's so impressive. I mean, wow. This is her skill set right here. I mean, look how comfortable she looks. Look at that.
So Bethany Shadburn makes her way back inside the arena here in inside 33 minutes.
Wow.
Bethany Shadburn unofficially is your winner on the women's side here in the 6K ruck run.
Wow.
And look at the utter devastation across the finish line as these athletes begin their immediate recovery.
We just saw Cedric LaPointe. Looks like beat out John Colty to the finish line. Noah Olson just a few steps behind them.
Still 7 minutes left to go until we get to the 40-minute cap. And it's a different type of event because you're not running tethered to anybody else, but it is notable that we saw one team finish inside the time cap this morning. Looks like we're going to have a significant number of athletes on the individual side finish inside of 40 minutes. Second place right now for the women, that is Maddie Edwards, who led for a long time early on. Notable the gap between Bethany Shadburn and Maddie Edwards, and then presumably between Maddie Edwards and the rest of the field. And that's something we saw on the team side as well. There was a huge gap, very top-heavy finishes.
One of the things I talked about with Justin Kotler when I was in town for the Open, 21.2, he said he thought Bethany Shadburn had one of the best engines in CrossFit.
Yes.
She certainly put that on display here.
Here comes Maddie Edwards now, who will be the second place finisher on the women's side. Just outside of 34 minutes.
Yeah, she's working. She's working.
Those are big points for Maddie.
That's great. Well done, well done. Yeah, I looked a lot worse when I finished, boy. Wow.
And it's hard to see. It looks like maybe
5 minutes remaining here until the 40-minute time cap on this 6K ruck run, as now the women's field starts to enter. Carrie Pierce has finished. And Chris, this is what you talked about in terms of how you push the tempo at the finish line to when you get to that finish line, you have left it all out on the field and you redline at that exact moment and hit your wall.
That's the thing about when you're doing events like this, what you're doing is maintaining a sustainable pace until you want to take that final risk to the finish. And what I'm talking about a risk is that you're going into a non-sustainable pace. You're essentially in a death zone intensity. You can't maintain it. You're eventually going to die. And what you want to do is die right when you reach the line. That's where experience comes in.
Carrie Pierce going with the Snow Angel recovery. Just trying to keep those limbs moving. And I mean, I say that a little tongue-in-cheek, but Chris, how important is that just to keep the body moving even though you're laying on the ground?
So part of it is that you want to get the heart rate down. That's the number one thing that you want to do. And so these athletes should know their ritual to lower their heart rate the fastest possible. For me, it's laying on the ground.
This is Dallin Pepper coming back into the arena and finishing on the men's side. He is your overall leader through 2 events. The young 19-year-old, so we'll see how many points that adds into his tally as he tries to both stay atop the leaderboard and also stay in position as one of the top 5 with those 5 games tickets on the line. Still early on in the weekend, our first of 3 events here on Saturday.
You know, that's the thing, is Dallin's seasoned enough where this, will be a setback for him, but the fact is that there's a lot of good events ahead for him.
And that's what this comes down to. It's picking your spots and calling your shots and understanding where you can move over the course of a weekend.
Right, and reframing this into a positive type of experience so that you don't lose your momentum.
You have just about 3 minutes left until the 40-minute time cap.
We're seeing some nice races to the finish here. Athletes jockeying for position even 37 minutes into this workout.
Brianna Wallen on the far side here, Screed coming on the women's side. Jacob Pfaff coming in. Jacob Pfaff had a phenomenal first day. Member of the U.S. Army Warrior Fitness Team, is in 11th place overall, so just outside that area for a last chance online qualifier spot.
And here comes Danielle Brandon and Brian Wynn as well.
It's impressive the speed that they're coming in. I mean, some of these athletes, the women, they're under 140 pounds, and they've got 50 pounds, and yet they're in a full sprint.
You talk about giving absolute credit. Brianna Wallen just came in at 125 pounds with a sandbag about a third of her weight, probably more than that, added on her back.
Which is incredible. It's incredible. That'd be like Tommy wearing, a vest that's 160 pounds.
It's like Tommy throwing you on his shoulders and doing the ruck run.
Right, or whatever that weight would be for 180 pounds.
We have about a minute and a half remaining. Dylan Martin. Look at Cole Sager. He's had the time to recover. He's throwing the wet rags on the back of his competitors as they come in.
What Cole has, like we were talking about, is that tolerance to lactate, fatigue. And that is something that you must train. The muscles want to turn off under those situations, and your job is to train them to stay turned on. And Cole, that is his gift. If Cole is in contention with 30 seconds to go, you better watch out, because you know what? He's right now in his sweet spot. That's where it was like, ooh. You see Cole Sager behind you, and it's coming down to a sprint to the finish. Although you don't want to think about losing, you're probably going to lose.
Tommy, 2 athletes we have not yet seen come in, one on the men's side, one on the women's side, at least finish. Spencer Panchik, who needs to make a move right now in the mid-teens, and then Danny Spiegel, who's in a qualification spot at the beginning of day 2, knew coming in that this would be an event that she would have to moderate and just kind of deal with to keep herself in contention, has not yet come in and finished.
Yeah, we had the chance to sit down and talk with her before the event, do a little interview. We mentioned the ruck, and she just kind of rolled her eyes and said...
And look at the fight for points real quick here as Panchik's trying to edge a couple of points out, running into the gym. Spencer Panchik knows points matter at this juncture.
It's impressive, the speed right there.
So he'll finish, with not a lot left in the tank. He'll leave it all out on the floor with 15 seconds left before the time cap.
That was a big cluster. We saw, 5 or 6 athletes all jockeying for position at the end there.
With 5 seconds remaining.
Go.
we will hit our time cap at 40 minutes.
Wow. Wow. This is a very difficult event, and it's impressive the level of effort that people are making at the finish. It shows how important it is. I mean, that they're aware that every spot counts. And you know what? Although there's a lot of competition, I am not going to give away one position now.
The athletes all thinking, I think, one thing at this point, Tommy. Glad that one's over.
Yeah.
What a boost, though, for Cole. I mean, seriously, what a boost. That was a pivotal workout for him. And the fact is that you look at Cole's performance back when they did the similar type of a workout in 2019 at the CrossFit Games. Cole did well, but this performance was significantly better. It shows his year-over-year performance that this guy, although he's a veteran, is getting better at the sport.
Tom, let's take a look back at it here. Cole Sager wins on the men's side. Bethany Shadburn wins on the women's side. Your impressions of how Event 3 played out?
Well, for one, it was impressive to see the young athlete James Sprague needing a top finish in this event after coming into the day in 29th. And for the most part, pretty much led until the final maybe 20 to 30 meters. And you got to admire the aggressiveness from the young athlete coming out and trying to take his shot and come out swinging. And through 3 laps, it looked like he might be able to hold off some of the top athletes, but as Chris said, you know, you have someone like Cole Sager waiting in the wings, and a burst from Sager at the finish line is all it took for him to take over the top spot overall and pass Sprague going away into the finish line. And now we just have to wait and see where the chip timer and the start played out.
You could see a visual almost breaking of the spirit once you saw Cole Sager sprinting up from behind. On the women's side, the win goes to Bethany Shadburn, and yeah, you mentioned Justin Collar saying she has an engine next to none. That showed itself.
Yeah, and early on it was Carly Lucas and Maddie Edwards setting the pace on the women's side. And, you know, like we saw in the teams too, sometimes you can be the early leader and come out hot during those first 2 rounds, but experience wins out with Bethany Shadburn on these amazing transitions. No wasted movement, opens it up with the teeth. That's like a party trick from college. Slams some water, and she cruises her way to a victory in this event. And she didn't just win, she destroyed the rest of the field in this event.
Here's the women's results. I feel like that's happened before, by the way. Pop that bottle of water. Only athlete to finish inside 34 minutes, Bethany Shadburn. Just a dominating win here in event number 3. Edwards, and then Alexis Raptis. Good finish for her right now, just outside of the qualification spot for a last chance online qualifier ticket. Cole Sager wins on the men's side with the teen James Sprague just behind him. And Sean Sweeney comes in 3rd. Let's go down to Nikki Brazier with Cole Sager and with Bethany Shadburn.
Congratulations to both of you. Bethany, we had a chance to catch up with Justin a little bit during the event. I know that you guys are a little bit of a home court advantage here with the heat and everything, but today was pretty exhausting out there. So just tell me a little bit about how that went for you.
I mean, it definitely was hot, but we've been training a lot and doing so much cardio, so much running. And I think just having the home court advantage of living in the elevation definitely helped, but whew, it was hot.
It looked like you had 0 wasted time or movement. You were opening the water bottles with your teeth as you went. How much of a strategy was that?
I was just kind of going with the flow. So Justin was yelling at me, just transition fast. So I was like, okay, I'll just put this on there. I'm thirsty though. How am I supposed to get water? And then I was like, okay, well, do what I can.
It worked. It totally worked.
Yeah.
We got to transition now into, some very different events. Looking ahead, how do you think the body's going to be holding up for those?
Hopefully okay. Like I said, living here, having the home court advantage of the elevation, hopefully we'll recover a little bit more. I live off of electrolytes, so just drinking tons of electrolytes, tons of water, lots of food, and just hoping for the best.
Well, congrats. Cole, I feel like this is the second time now we've talked about you and one of the younger athletes kind of going neck to neck in the end. Where did you find the energy to finish out with a sprint?
Yeah, I think that comes just like a little bit of just history, knowing how to run a race. So I kind of just held back and ran my own race and let James do his thing. And once you get into that last lap, you start to feel the pace. You can feel James, you can see where he's at, and that kind of gets you out of your own head and kind of running the race, and then it's just a matter of competing.
This is now the second time you've done an event like this, but obviously different factors, the course, the heat, it all plays into it. So how is this time different for you?
I think just like coming out of the pandemic and getting to be in person with everybody again and just feeling that energy. There's so much energy out there in that sun, even with, all the crowd going out there and suffering the heat with us. You can feel that energy, and that was just fun to ride.
Some good momentum for you now. We've done 2 interviews, 2 event wins. How does that set you up for the rest of the weekend?
I'm just going to go get some food. I'm going to rest, and we'll just take those as they come.
Nice. Well, congrats. Great job to both of you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Nikki, thank you for Cole Sager. It is 2 event wins in 3 events. Bethany Shadburn, socks, Crocs, and opening water bottles on the run. The Ruck Run is in the books. 6 Ks with sandbags behind you. Turn your eyes forward. Still 2 more events to go on Saturday in the desert.
What I think differentiates Whoop from a lot of the other wearables out there is the accuracy of its data, number 1, and the user interface, number 2, being able to just go on the app, open it up, immediately see whether you're red, yellow, green, see how high your strain is around the loop from a 0 to a 21.
I'm a big deal to my little brother. Total trust God, keep them real close. Shawty do the most.
One of the biggest things that I think Whoop has done for me is allow me to really ingrain better habits. Since wearing the Whoop, I've wanted to, as a competitive person, see my strain score get as high as it can, see my recovery score get as high as it can. So in order to do that, I've been pushing myself a little bit harder in the gym, and I've been doing those little extra things to recover as much as possible to get that number up.